Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. Today was the Belgian GP, and we're here to talk about that and many other things. Rob, man, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good, but we've got to really kind of hit something first before we get into this week's race. Apparently, last week we got hacked, and two people that were impersonating us recorded an episode.
Well, the whole episode was fine, except for a section that they dropped in.
An atrocious quiz, and me and Brian were none the wiser until we started getting hit with all these text messages. We just thought we'd have a week off, but somebody just hacked us. They do a really good impression of both of us. So yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, well, you know what? They can't all be good ones.
Actually, we got some love for it, although love in inverted commas, because it was kind of more, we'll have some of whatever you were smoking. It was hilarious, but we have no idea what was going on. So, you know what, I'll take that.
Oh, man. Speaking of taking that in the transition world, that's called a bad one. Daniel Ricciardo got paid off, closed the deal, and will be taking some money from McLaren to not show up next year. And, you know, rumors are that he'd asked for $21 million, and then I read a couple places that it was closer to 15 that he'll be walking away with. Yeah. I really hope we find him in F1 next year. There are seats open, and I know they're probably not at the teams he'd prefer, but it would be great having him. And even if it's a return to Renault, or with Williams or with whomever, it would be great. I think it'd be great to have Danny Rick stay in F1.
Yeah, I do. I think, and I've probably upset some people with this view, but I love the guy and I want to see him in F1, but I don't want to see him, I don't know, slink out the back door. I think, let's say that Williams don't increase their pace next year and they're pretty much propping up the table at the back end. Is there any point in going there and just pottering around in 18th and 19th? I think he's got a point to prove, and I think he needs to be in a seat that I'm not saying is challenging for wins, because I don't think he gets that drive anymore now, but something like an Alpine, which is up at the sharp end. I think he has one last chance to prove himself and show the driver that we thought he was, but it never quite panned out in McLaren. And if that doesn't work out, then I think he's kind of done. What's your thoughts on his whole, he might take a sabbatical, because people were saying, McLaren offered to shift him over to an Indy seat. He's like, no, I'm only interested in F1, so that means I need to sit out next year. I sit out next year. But if he sits out next year, does he ever come back?
I think he might. Recognizing he's not as young as some, like Esteban sat out a year and he was young enough to come back. I think that's sort of I don't want to say common, but it's not rare, I guess, to have someone say, I'm going to take a year off and then look for a chair when one's open afterwards and see if I can come back. Because he only wants F1.
Like, say, Alonso takes a time off and comes back. He's a big name. They know he's got the talent.
World champion is a little different.
Yeah. So does Danny Rick have that pull if he takes a year out? If he takes a year out, he?
I think he's got the talent. The problem is he's at the wrong end of the age.
Yeah.
If taking the year out, your skills aren't getting sharpened. And I don't care how much time you do in a simulator and all these other things. You know, we've talked to people on here, Break and others, and we've talked about the simulators. I feel like he's at the wrong end of the age range to be taking a year out. It's just not helping him. So I'd love for him to stick around, but I get your point, though. Like, at Williams, is that the way you want his career to start ending?
And it's not a sport that's really too... Okay, it's friendly. It looks like everyone gets along, but, you know, you only had to listen to Lando's quote of just basically saying he had no sympathy for him, because... when you peel back the whole, they all have a good time. They look like they hang out at the races, and they seem like some of them on the surface good friends, and maybe some of them really are good friends. But at the end of the day, it's dog eat dog, and they're all there for their seat and their drive. And
right.
I don't know, it was that shocking what Lando said, but it was kind of maybe, I don't know, caught some people by surprise that he was that blunt about it.
Yeah. Other news that came out this week, I thought it was kind of cool. Audi announcing that in 2026 there'll be an engine supplier in Formula One. So it's kind of neat getting the team in there. There's long been rumors about Porsche joining F1 as well as an engine supplier. And obviously Audi and Porsche are both owned by Volkswagen. So the question then becomes, A, does Porsche enter as well? And B, if so, will they be sharing notes in the hallways at VW about making F1 engines? It'll be kind of fascinating to see how that works. It'll be nice to have a little different engine supplier as well. Right now it's basically Mercedes and Ferrari. Obviously Honda and Honda Red Bull powertrains and whatever it is for those two teams, for Red Bull and for AlphaTauri. And then, of course, you have Renault for Alpine. But it'll be nice to, I think, have a little more engine supplier options in F1.
Yeah, I mean, it is cool, and it was the news a lot of people were expecting. It's just kind of like, it's 4 years away. I can't get that excited about it, but it's cool to see them kind of after kind of will they, won't they for so long. Then they kind of said they will be there. However, somebody who said they won't be there, or not at least not in the guise that they are right now, is Alfa Romeo going to part ways with Sauber at the end of 23. So unless I've read that wrong, because I read the press release and their brand won't be associated with Sauber anymore, which means this stops being an Alfa Romeo team, right?
Right. Well, they're only a title sponsor, right?
Yeah.
It's not, the car's not an Alfa Romeo in any way, shape, or form. They just slapped their name on it, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't think that'll be that huge a deal. As like I said, it's just a title sponsorship. It's not. They don't supply parts in any way,
No,
shape,
agree.
or form.
But then is that the team? Again, not knowing exactly how this stuff works, and maybe you can educate me here, Brian, but is that a way in for the Andretti team to buy the Sauber team?
Oh, great question. I didn't see you going there. I was going to say, does that mean that they're going to end up leaving Ferrari and end up using Audi powertrains? And I was going to say, I think that's the rumor I'm seeing. But you want to talk about Andretti? You want to talk about practice? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think so necessarily. I don't see Sauber. I mean, they've actually joined and worked with a variety of manufacturers and constructors over the years. So maybe
Sauber have been around since the dinosaurs.
forever.
Right?
They were
They're just one of the
BMW. They've
oldest
been with
teams
everybody.
ever.
Yeah, but I don't see that. I don't see them selling it, part of it or any of it, to Andretti. And Andretti wants their own team, and a lot of people are really taking a number 2 on the whole Andretti trying to join F1 thing, which is a little confusing to me.
I mean, I'm all up for another team joining the grid, but that really seems to be being crushed at the moment. So it kind of seems that the only way in is to go buy something that's already there. But
yeah. Anyway,
talking about things that are already there, God, we are on it for segues today. I'm telling you.
Yeah, we're so much better than last week, baby. No, okay. So Spa, big news. This was great. I woke up this morning in Milwaukee. I wasn't sure where I was. And I looked at my phone, and Spa has been confirmed for 2023. Spa-Francorchamps stays on our calendar for 2023. Now, I would have preferred it to be more than a 1-year deal, but we'll take what we can get.
Yeah. Beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can. And so I just did. And so, I would love to see it longer, but that was great news. And I know we'll talk about the race here in a second. While I don't consider today's race a banger, it was, in my mind, a tale of two halves. Great first half. But we'll get there in a second. But anyway, I'm excited. Are you excited, Rob, to have Spa on for another year?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I absolutely love it. I mean, the depth of which I kind of love that track really was on display today. So it was the first game of my over 40s footy season today, and I was like, oh, but it's Spa, and we kick off at 9, and the race starts at 9, and I was absolutely torn. But in the end, I kind of volunteered to be on the subs bench for the first 10 minutes so I could watch the first 10 minutes of the race and then jump on, play for 15, and then come back off and watch the next 15. So I kind of did that. I was watching today's race in 15-minute intervals.
On your phone on the sidelines?
On my phone on the side of a soccer field, kind of football field, sat there and I'd forget that I was supposed to be being subbed back in, and they, hey Rob, you're back in. I'm like, oh man, put the phone back down, run back on again. I since watched the race. I rewatched the race then when I got home, but yeah. So that shows I do love it, and we will talk about today's race, whether it was what we thought of it, but so happy to see it staying there for next year. Yeah,
a couple quick notes on videos and social media. There was a great F1, and my little grid of analysis from last time didn't really stick, so we're just going to say a very good video. Yeah, last week's episode was just a mess. Charles Leclerc recalls his emotional first F1 win at Spa. It is just a really nice feature about 2019. Charles getting his first win in F1 at Spa the day after his friend died on the track racing, Antoine Hubert, in an F2 race. And it's not real long. Take some time, go watch. It's worth it. And then send it. Yeah, that's what we called it, right? Send it. And then another one that was also worth your time, On a Mission for Fried Chicken. No Breaks, Daniel Ricciardo's channel. he has a video where he's in a McLaren driving around LA picking up fried chicken and then kind of eating them all on the wing of the car and reviewing the chicken. And I love fried chicken. And I thought Daniel Ricciardo's review was fantastic. That's why he needs to stay in F1. It's for fried chicken reviews. Sign me up. I loved it. So if you haven't seen On a Mission for Fried Chicken on Daniel Ricciardo's channel, just go check it out. It was a lot of fun. And one last thing kind of before we get into the race, we have an epic Pit Lane Paul, notice from the track. Just a great review. So please stay tuned for that at the end of our review. And I forgot to get a 100 Seconds of DRS guest for this week, so I'd like to apologize for that. It was a busy week at work. And so if anyone would like to be on the 100 Seconds of DRS, we would love to have you. Reach out to us. Twitter is one of the easier places at F1 Dirty Side, or you can even email us, dirtysideofthetrack@gmail.com. So my notes there, Rob, do you want to take us into the race week?
Yeah, sure. It was actually pretty interesting the way that practice unfolded here. So we don't normally spend too much time on practice. And the only reason I'm going to here is because it suddenly started unfolding that there were going to be all these penalties all over the place. And
the whole world was going to take penalties.
Oh, everybody was going to take penalties. It's like they were basically starting over at Paul Ricard. They were going to be starting so far back. And it was just difficult trying to work out, what does this all mean? What's the strategies going to be? In FP2, we had some rain towards the end of the session. The only reason I bring that up is because it caught a couple of drivers by surprise, and there were a couple of onboard moments. I think it was Lewis and Lando went up down Eau Rouge and up Radillon, and as they crested, they hit those slippery stuff, and there was kind of big old kind of tank slapper. They both held it, but you got to think that surely has to be one of the scariest moments in an F1 car where you're not expecting the wet. Because I'm sure once it's raining, you're in wet mode, right? You know that you're looking for the slippy stuff. But not many cars had phoned in that it was really starting to rain yet, and I wouldn't have wanted to be in that car at that point. And then you get to FP3, and you're like, well, okay, this is where I'm going to start thinking about my fantasy team for the week, because I've got to start looking at what's going on. And it was just insane, because it's like, well, I'm basically going to have to trash my entire team. If I want to gamble on all the penalty people won't make their way through the field, I'm going to have to rip up my team. And anyway.
Well, I've mentioned this before, I love the jumbled start to the race itself. And whether that's a wet quali that allows you to kind of have people with, in different positions than they should be in the race pace, not really represented on the grid in order, whether it's something that just causes that. And this time it was 6 or 7, 6 cars taking penalties and moving to the back. Some of them title contenders, some of them not, but it was fun to watch. So I was out with some friends, and I said, I think the beginning of the race, and I didn't know what, beginning 10, 15 laps, whatever, are going to be fantastic as cars find their right spot from a race pace perspective. I loved, I know we'll get into quality now, but I loved the beginning of this race. The first half, I thought was...
Keep your powder dry, Brian.
Come on.
I know you're still gloriously hungover from last night, and you're trying to... Your brain's not functioning in the right directions.
Great.
So, as if to tease us then, after we'd waited for the whole break in the season to come back, we'd tune in for quali.
Yep.
We tune in for quali, and it's like, it's not going to be coming yet because someone binned it in the race before, and they're going to have to repair a barrier, and that just felt like forever waiting for that to go. And I know they've got to do it. Don't get me wrong, safety issues, they have to repair the barrier, but just took forever. We got up and running, and I'm going to let you hit this one because this one does feel like a quali sap stat.
All right, then. So, I think what was fascinating to me was we lost 5 drivers, and with Valtteri, we should probably get one of these in here. Zap stats. All right, here we go. So, Valtteri Bottas went out in Q1. It is the first time in 148 races since Monaco of 2015 that VB went out in Q1. Valtteri hasn't gone out in Q1 in 148 races. Now, we know he was taking a huge engine penalty, so he knew where he was starting. And it was kind of amazing. There's a tweet from Chris Medland, and if you're not following him, you should be. He had a great tweet that Valtteri was taking a 30 grid penalty, 15 for the power unit and 15 for the gearbox. But because neither one of them were back of grid penalties, that means by finishing in P20 for quali, plus a 30 penalty spot drop would put him P50, but since that's not a thing, and everybody else had back of grid penalties, he gets to start P14.
Yeah, it was just like trying to do like a Sudoku puzzle with none of the boxes filled in. It was like, how does this all work? And apparently it's a loophole that Alpha have exploited there, I think, that they're going to close up soon, which is that whole defining this back of grid penalty versus not, because that's just insane that he was able to take 30 penalty places
from 20.
Start ahead.
He starts 14. That was great. And the last thing I'll say about Q1, and I'll say it again in Q2, how great was Alex Albon? If you weren't standing in front of your television applauding this man, well, then I wasn't either. But it was really cool to watch. Like, he was flying. And all year he said that Williams doesn't have a lot of downforce. Well, thank God we're at Spa where you don't need that much downforce, so it worked.
Exactly. And then, like you say, Q2 was kind of, I don't know, a little bit nothing. It was just kind of nothing apart from, again, Albon through again.
Flying.
Oh, man.
When he would come around and he'd be sixth place, Alex Albon. Like, what?
And it's like, then, okay, we get through to Q3, and it's like, well, we know Max is starting at the back, and he hasn't got anything to prove, and Sainz really needs to get up there, but, let's just see what this pace is going to be, because FP3 had kind of shown some signs that maybe the Red Bull was going to be flying here, and boy, oh boy, was it.
Holy cow.
I mean, that lap from Max was just in... it was, well, let's put it this way, it was a sign of things to come.
Yeah, and I know we are going to talk a lot about Max, but he is in another place. I thought it was great when we left Quali and we said, all right, so starting tomorrow, we're going to have Fernando Alonso on row 2 and we're going to have Alex Albon on row 3. I'm like, pump it right in my veins, Formula One. Welcome back. Here we go. And let's get the race going.
And I've got to be honest, right? So as we move to the race now, so I'm sat on the sidelines, on the bleachers with my phone out, looking at I'm supposed to be watching my teammates kick off, but I'm glued to my little phone screen instead.
Great teammate you are. Great teammate.
And what I'm going to say here, I'm in no way endorsing injury or mass destruction of cars, but what I did want was a big coming together, or at least kind of spaghetti junction of cars at turn 1 to actually hold up all those out of place cars. I wanted somebody in the midfield, like about somewhere around 6th or 7th, to kind of jackknife into each other at that first hairpin, meaning nobody else could get around them. So I didn't want anybody to be taken out of the race, or debris everywhere and safety car out in the first corner. But I just thought if that whole lot could get held back and let the first lot, Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, kind of get out a little bit, that would be superb. And for the first time, I think, in living memory, there was nothing. They all got through clean at the first corner. Like, there was nothing.
There were only really 2 situations the entire race. And they happened pretty quickly, though, in the first couple laps. Not on the first turn. You're right. I expected more. But so, the race does start. As you said, it was clean. Checo, however, had a horrible start. He looked like he was getting
reversed, didn't he?
He was getting swallowed up. Cars were going around him on each side. I'm like, where is he going? It's like I thought it was the Homer Simpson when he backs into the bushes. I was pretty sure we weren't going to see him in a minute. And then a couple turns later at the end of the Kemmel Straight, Lewis made a mistake, and he took credit for it afterwards. He goes, "Yeah, that was on me." It was on him. He just closed off onto Fernando. And then he went flying. The car went in the air. And, you knew the car wasn't going to work after that.
Well,
these are F1 cars, not rally cars.
Exactly, because the commentary, he came back down and they were like, oh, it's a big collision and Lewis has been up in the air. But they both seem to have pulled away unscathed. I'm like, there is no way you can drop a Formula One car back down onto the floor from that thing and nothing breaks.
You can't even do that with my car. Like my regular car here, if I went that high in the air, I'd pull over and be like, something's broken. I mean,
yeah, and I think it was literally 2-3 corners later. He seemed to kind of have pace, but I imagine something fractured, something was leaking, and I guess when something dropped below a certain pressure level, he just seemed to just be coasting and got nothing. So, and I think I can't remember where he parked it up, but we were eventually at safety car situation, right?
Yeah, between that and then we had Valtteri.
Oh, of course. Sorry, yeah.
Latifi pulled a Latifi. I'm sorry, Nikki, but he pulled a Latifi.
Doing so well recently
I
as
know,
well.
But then he said, "Judge me on the pace from here on out." And this was his first race. He dipped his tires off the side, lost control, took out the birthday boy Valtteri, and then kept racing and finished, way at the back. He seems like a great guy. You gotta agree, his time in F1 is coming to a close at the end of this year, right? When his contract is done.
It has to be right. I mean, kudos to the guy anyway. Everyone kind of says, "Oh, he's a terrible driver." I'm sorry. Anybody that gets one of those beasts around a track for 44 laps is not a terrible driver. He just doesn't belong in the elite 20. He doesn't.
But he's clearly in the next 20 after that. I mean, he's one of the top 30 40 drivers in the world. So let's take it easy saying he sucks.
He sucks kind of from a top 20 perspective, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not exactly like he's in the best car, but Albon made it look pretty good and finished in the points.
True.
So then Charles comes in for, he sees smoke coming from his front right, and he comes in for an early pit stop. And at this point, I'm watching with my friend from Detroit, Paul. We're like, oh, God, here it goes again. But it was nothing, and it turned out there was some debris, a tear-off in his brake duct that was causing it to overheat and smoke. And upon further Twitter review, it was Max's tear-off.
Or was somebody able to track the tear-off, were they? So just by the way, for anybody new to this, what we're referring to is the visor on a helmet has got like these funky little kind of multi-layers of almost saran wrap where you can just peel off when it gets dirty, you peel it off and you throw it away and you try and throw it not into your own air duct. But yeah, these things, I mean, that's just bad luck. That's just pure bad luck. You can't even blame that on a Ferrari screw-up, right? That's just sheer bad luck.
I think Max is playing 4D chess, and he knew exactly how to do it. That man is so on top of his game right now. He
sits in a simulator doing tear-off simulations.
I can't say any of those things, but he knows how to drop that tear-off right into Charles' brake duct. So
I don't even think... Do you know what? The way Max is flying right now, he could drop the tear-offs into his own brake ducts and probably put the car into reverse and drive backwards around the track and beat Charles.
Max could go out with no brakes and win the races. So anyway, speaking of Max, by lap 7, he went from 14th or 15th. He went from already up to 5th.
Oh, it was amazing.
He just was carving through people, and Albon was flying. And then by lap 8, he was up to 3rd, and I was just loving watching these cars pass and overtake, not just on the Kemmel Straight and not just at the end of it, but even before the bus stop chicane after Blanchimont, they'd come through, and before the bus stop, there'd be people taking moves there. It was just epic, man. I loved, again, I recognize I'm a huge Homer biased lover of Spa-Francorchamps, so watching a race there is like great. But man, I thought the first half of this thing had a lot of action, a lot of overtakes. I enjoyed it.
We had some like four-way, like 4 cars abreast going into corners at some places. Again, it was just, it was all kind of building up to, this is going to be a great race, I'm hoping. It became obvious that Max was probably going to win it because he was just in a rocket ship.
I didn't know that at first. Like, I thought maybe Carlos could hold on. When he was at the front and he pitted and Max did not pit right away, I'm like, oh, this is a strategic call. This will be fascinating to see what happens. And Carlos gets dropped into traffic. And I'm like, well, we got to find out what happens here. And it takes, I think, until lap 16. Max pits, and it was over at that point. Even though he came out in second, it was too easy for him at that point.
And I know it's easy to go all in on Ferrari and criticize, but...
we're going to do that too.
We're going to do that. Yeah, well, we're going to do a little bit of a twist on it after we've done the race review. I haven't told you about this, but we are. Okay. Should they have seen they were going to drop Charles into that much... Sainz into that much traffic?
Maybe. I mean, because you should know that.
They've got all these models where they can see, like, if we come in at this point, we come out, we're going to drop into about here, and it just felt like... I don't think his tyres were completely shot to pieces. Not that we were told. So... maybe that was the best. Maybe that was the best of a worst situation. Maybe they projected if they stay out another couple, 2, 3, 4 laps or what have you, then he drops in even worse traffic. I don't know, but it just like the combo of him being dropped into that traffic and then Max just making hay while the sun shine. It was like, yeah, this is done unless Max's car blows up. And
Max just took off into the sunset. On lap 20, a lot of people are making comments of this, and I'm sure we'll make a joke about it too. Charles, race engineer, gets on and says, what kind of tires do you want to go to? Do you want to go to hards? Do you want to go to softs? Would you like mediums? Would you like to stop now? Do you want to wait on your stop? Question. Should we talk about, would you like some different drink in the bag? We can stop and do that too. Question. And I'm like, what in the hell is going on here? It's like they took the reflection over summer break was, you know what? We're not letting the drivers have enough say. So maybe we should let them make the decisions with no data in front of them whatsoever and tell them, put them on the hot seat. What was that?
But ask it all at the same time.
What was that?
Oh, and by the way, just while you're trying to get in a quick lap as well, could you calculate pi to 15 places? I mean, it was just, again.
What was that? I've never heard that before, like to that degree. I've heard them ask, like maybe Lewis or somebody, is it time to go to inters?
Yeah, but
that's it.
It's usually one question, isn't
Right.
it? It's kind of we've got, and normally the way the other teams almost phrase it is like, we've got our view, we're just going to take your input as well into it, so how are you feeling right now?
But this was like 7 questions. I felt like he was ordering at Chipotle. Like, what did he else want on your burrito? Would you like white rice or brown rice? Question. And like it just kept going. I literally looked at my friend sitting there like, what in the F is happening at Ferrari? Oh. And then they pit both cars. They do a double stack on lap 26, and one comes out on mediums and one comes out on hards. I'm like, what is that? That was an interesting strategy. Like, do you not know what the best tire is and you're just covering off? And I know they had to change compounds, but they'd already changed where they could have been on the same at this point. But
yeah,
I don't know.
No, I know, and I'm not gonna beat up on Ferrari too much here.
Oh, I got one more for the end, obviously. But
yeah, we have got one more for the end, and I think sometimes we can now be getting a little bit guilty of every time they even do a tiniest thing, we're going to jump on them. But you know what? It's because they deserve it.
Well,
anyway,
the next one is bad. So lap 32, my favorite note to put in our little notes page as we get ready. Did we hit a lull?
We did.
I think
I don't normally agree with you. I normally say that you're too kind of wanting to have non-stop action, but yeah, it was the return of the DRS train, and
well, we didn't even have that at first.
I can't remember if this is a guest that we've had on, a DRS guest, or I just read it or heard it somewhere, but somebody was talking about how maybe DRS could be reevaluated where you don't have to use it in the specified place. So, like, if you cross the line a second behind the car in front, you now activate DRS for that lap. But it's yours to use wherever you want to use it. And maybe, I don't know, they say you've got 4 seconds of DRS to use wherever you want to use it, right? They've got to do something. They either get rid of it, they either decide, look, the cars can follow now, we don't need it anymore. Or they have to just change the way of its usage and maybe allowing it to be at the driver's discretion where to use it, although they'll probably all end up using it in exactly the same place to defend against each other. But it doesn't work when...
It doesn't. So just for listeners, when the flap is open, when you're using DRS, it'll either close at the end of the DRS area or when you touch the brakes, because you need downforce when braking. So to Rob's point, I guess it could come on anywhere as long as you're not on the brakes.
Yeah, and I mean, again, because of what it is, it's probably only going to get used on the straights, which is probably where they already allocate it anyway. But I was just kind of thinking out loud, which is kind of like, if you're going to keep it, you've got to change something about it. Maybe because the cars can follow now, you reduce the time and it's not a second anymore. It's half a second to the car in front. I don't know, but...
It's interesting. I'd love fellow Dirty Siders' thoughts on that. And then
we can't get rid of DRS, though. Not 100%.
No. Yeah,
because
we wouldn't have
we'd have to change the name of our quiz.
Yeah, exactly. 100 seconds of 2 random guys asking people questions. So then McLaren, not to be outdone by Ferrari, came out with a note to Lando around lap 33 or so, give or take a couple there. And they said, Lando, it's too late for Plan G. What? I mean, like, again, the drivers are so busy in there, managing the gears and throwing tear-offs into people's brake ducts and steering and driving and watching the tiny little rearview mirrors. Now they got to calculate 9 plans.
The funniest thing was, though, the way they said it was like... They were like almost like letting him down. Like it was his favourite of all the plans. It's like, it's too late for Plan G.
Yeah,
and like Lando's in the car going, oh man, that's my favourite of all the plans.
Plan G, which is when you pull right in now and you can get some candy. I mean, like, it's too late, Lando. We're very sorry. We've missed Plan G. Carlos comes on and asks about a 3-stopper. There were a couple times people asked about doing extra stops. What would that do? And they're like, well, you'd finish behind George. So... like, don't do it. And then, actually, one of my favorite parts...
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just about to say, now we come to probably what was my favourite overtake of the entire race.
Esteban's, right?
Oh, yes.
So good. It was so good. When they... So, I'll just say this. So, it was Gasly, Vettel, and Ocon behind those two. and Gasly and Seb are battling as they kind of come down into Eau Rouge and up Radion. They're kind of battling, and they're, it seems, dead focused on each other. And no one's looking at Esteban, and he's like, hey guys, and he comes shooting down the left side of the Kemmel Straight. He outbrakes both of them, makes the corner, and takes them both. And I'm like, oh my God, that is big brain move by Esteban. That was huge.
I meant to text you before we start recording saying we really needed a Roadrunner Mimi for that section because he just came flying down. It was awesome. It was like that lit up that part of the race because we had kind of got into that kind of lull, and then when they kind of showed that, it was like, oh, that is sweet.
That was such a move. I hope he has that set up on a TV in his house on replay the whole time for the next couple of weeks. But yeah, you mentioned the DRS train on lap 39. We had a monster train behind Alex. Just huge. It was Lance, Lando. We had Joe, Yuki, and Danny Rick. All in a train, all had DRS, and they basically finished the race effectively kind of doing this DRS train. And that was, choo-choo, boring train to watch. But it allowed Alex to finish in the points. He held on for 10th. So last thing I have about the race itself before we kind of recap it with some stats and thoughts is, man, what happened with Charles' pit stop? We know why. So just let me explain. I was with some people who are newer to Formula One, and I was explaining to them why they would pit at the end of the race. And at that point, with 2 laps left, Charles is running in 5th, and he's not going to win. And he had about 19 plus seconds behind the car behind him, who was Fernando. And so he's like, all right, if they pit and do a perfect pit stop, they should be able to hypothetically get him out in front of Fernando on brand new soft tires. At this point of the race, the car is lighter than it's been because it's running lower on fuel. You have fresh, soft tires on, and you can go get the fastest lap of the race. So what they were trying to do was take the fastest lap point from Max and get it to Charles. That would be a 2-point swing simply by pitting and running the fastest lap. So in theory, it makes total sense. In execution, it was a Ferrari, I can't say any of the words I want to use next, but mistake of epic proportions to not have had it timed correctly from when he would come in and then come out. It put pressure on Charles, and he was speeding. He came out behind Fernando. He had to work past him. His fastest lap was 0.6 off Max's fastest lap because he was battling Fernando. He gets ahead of him, and then he gets a 5-second penalty and ends up in 6th. So by taking a pit stop to try to win back 2 points, they cost themselves more than that in the standings.
It was just insane because there just wasn't enough time. It's a great idea if you've got a gimme of a pit stop. I don't know, what did they say? It was like 19-second window to get out in front of the car.
It's a fast one.
And they had 19 seconds to Alonso. If they'd had 20, 22, 23, 24, then it becomes a no-brainer because you can even take an inverted quotes, a slow pit stop from Formula One standards and still come out in front of him and off you go and try and get your fastest lap. But there was no way. There was no way he wasn't dropping into a battle with Fernando. I just don't... That was our desperation move. That was... We want to try and get the fastest lap. We haven't really got the gap to behind to do it, but screw it, we'll do it anyway, which was just...
And I know people are going to want to say the 5-second penalty is totally on Charles. I get that. It is. He did that. But I feel as though he felt he had to push it because of this call. They probably said, hey, we got Fernando right up your trumpet, so be speedy with it here and we'll see what we can do. I'm sure he was pressing to make sure he got ahead of Fernando because they put him in that position. Oh, man. And it was cool. Different story. To see Seb finish 8th, to see Pierre finish 9th, and Alex get a point at 10th. I loved seeing those guys finish in the top 10. That was brilliant.
Yeah, that was cool. That was really cool. Oh, so that was Belgium. I know you've got a whole bunch of SAP stats lined up for it, and we do want to talk about Max. So what do you want to do? Your stats, or do you want to stats or Max?
Let's talk Max first.
Okay, so I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna do my little thing here, which is that I will hold my hands up and say, here on this pod, we may be a little guilty of spending too much time Ferrari bashing and not enough time giving Max kudos for just genuinely being a fantastic driver this year. And that's because, like we've always said, we're two guys pull up a bar stool and chat F1. I'm happily a Ferrari fan. Well, not happily. I am a Ferrari fan, therefore we probably want to unload on them when they screw things up. But we need to have a couple of minutes here to just talk about how insanely good Max has been this year. I have to stay away from anything on Twitter that tries to talk about him being the false champion of last year. You know, the guy did nothing wrong. He just took advantage of an unfortunate incident, which meant he won it, right?
Even before that race, he'd earned it.
Exactly. So the fact now he's going to win it by an absolute mile, actually, while part of me is completely sad and angry because of what Ferrari have been doing, he's been just fantastic all year, and today kind of epitomized that when he went on his rocket ship. So what I wanted to do was I was sitting there thinking, on my drive home from football, I was like, I wonder how good Max has been. If we could wave a magic wand and we could un-Ferrari the Ferrari team and take away all the elements of poor decision-making and just give Charles the points he could have had, like in Monaco and France, any kind of place where the team screwed up. I went through, yes, I did. I got my Excel sheet out. I made myself a pivot table, and I got all the points from all the teams, from all the races this year. And I wasn't completely scientific. What I basically said was...
Ladies, he's married. Sorry.
What I basically said was that if Ferrari were on for an easy 1-2 and then the strategy screwed it up, I just literally gave Ferrari the 1-2. I didn't go beyond what might have happened after that because I haven't got a model that could do that, right? So if Charles could have finished first and he ends up finishing third, I literally just put him up into first and shunted all the points down. What that basically came out as if we un-Ferrari the season, as of today, instead of Max being 268 versus Sergio in second on 181, we'd still have Max at first on 258, so 10 points lower, and Charles up at 218. So he'd still be 40 points behind. Okay, we'd be closer. It'd be one and a bit race distance, full race win behind, but it wouldn't be done and dusted like it is now. So therefore, it's not really all Ferrari. So then I went, okay, what about Charles? He's made a couple of mistakes. He's spun out when he shouldn't have. He's attacked Sergio going for third in, I can't remember which race now, it escapes me, but he was pushing when he shouldn't. He spun out and he finished sixth when he could have held station at fourth. So I kind of rectified Charles' mistakes. So if we get a perfect world where Ferrari don't make any screw-ups and Charles makes no mistakes whatsoever, it's dead level. I make it 250-250 to Max and Charles. So what we're saying...
sorry, so what... I was going to ask. So what you're saying is if everything were ham and jam, totally perfect for Ferrari and Charles, at best they'd be tied with the real-life regular Max, who has had problems of his own that you didn't solve for. So Max's flaws...
I didn't correct any of Max's flaws. I also didn't correct either of the... They both had DNFs through engine failures. And I'm not correcting that because stuff happens, right? Engines blow up regardless of who you are, right? But I just kind of thought that means that just Max being Max with a couple of DNFs is still going to be tied with the most perfect way that Ferrari could have played out. And it's not a perfect world. And Ferrari have shot themselves in the foot, and Charles has made mistakes under pressure. And what that's meant is Max has been a machine. Absolute machine. And we're sitting here, and the only real questions I think we got left for the season are how early does Max wrap it up? And does Sergio hammer home number 2 now and they finish 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship? Because today, Sergio has jumped over Charles into second.
That's amazing. And we have talked about Max's greatness throughout the season. You know, the fact that he's on clip, I think he was the 6th winningest in a season driver so far, 70-some-odd% of the wins so far this year. We've talked about all of the things he's done, but there are a couple stats I want to hit from the race. However, Rob, since Ferrari heard that you were going to have this analysis, they knew that, and they're actually driving by right now. You can hear them coming. Oh, there they go. They just went by. They weren't ready to talk. We do have some stats from the race, if we can move on.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to make sure that, we're acknowledging here on the dirty side that, yes, Ferrari are a clown show at the moment, but that should not detract from the fact that Max has been just
the best.
Just been superb.
Well, you asked last week who I thought would win, and I said it's a surprise to me when anyone other than Max wins at this point. So we do have some stats from the race today, and we'll use... I'll try to keep rotating through all of the amazing submissions we have.
By the way, feel free to carry on submitting Sapstat jingles. They've been great, so keep them coming.
So Max won. This is pretty amazing. He won from 10th on the grid the last race, if you remember Hungary before the break. Today he went out and won from 14th on the grid. consecutive races won from 10th or lower on the grid has only happened one other time in F1 history, ever, since the 50s. And it was 1959, the last race, and then the first race of 1960 by none other than Bruce McLaren. The only other person to ever do this, what he just did. It's the lowest winning grid position, 14th in Red Bull's F1 history. Max just did that today. This is one that blew my mind. He never led a green flag lap at Spa until today. Because if you remember, he won last year's race, but it was under whatever that was, behind the safety car for a lap. So he started 14th, and by lap 12, he was in the lead. And then just a couple non-Max points because the world still exists without Max. It was Alonso's 9th consecutive points finish. I didn't see that coming. That snuck up on me when I found that stat. And that's despite, having Lewis try to run him off the road on lap 1. And then Charles P6. I'm sorry, I'm not going to play the Benny Hill again, but he has now had one podium finish in the last 9 races. What? I know we had the stat summer break that Lewis had more podiums than Charles. He now has one podium. It was his win in Austria. He has one podium in the last 9 Grands Prix. That's nuts! Anyway, well, we're just two clowns who enjoy watching the race, but we actually have a professional who goes on behalf of the dirty side and reports back. Let's hear what Pit Lane Paul had to say.
Well, there we go. That's Belgium done. It's good to be back after the shutdown. Fun fact number 1 is that during the entire qualifying session yesterday, I honestly had no idea what was happening. And at the end, who was where? The only thing I knew was when Valtteri told me that no matter what happens, he will be 14th. That sort of killed the mood. So imagine my shock when we are seemingly lined up 13th place. My mind was blown. In Belgium, there are 3 official languages, which are French, German and Dutch. And there's no actual language like for Flemish, which everyone thinks they speak. So based on all this, and the fact that Belgians seemingly do not know their own language, qualifying shouldn't have been too much of a shock for us. As for the race, for us it lasted a little over a lap with Valtteri after he was caught in a Latifi spin and we were beached. Happy birthday, Valtteri. Really, really great that was. Lewis decided he didn't like Fernando again and gave him a space, which totally ruined his race. Due to the way the car's built, there is always going to be some damage when your opponent's tyre is sitting on your floor and then your tyre ramps up off his. So a lot of damage to hydraulic pipes. I guess that causes oil leaks and naturally some description, and therefore terminal issues. He was never going to continue for that one. And from then on, it was a case of Max Verstappen. He took the lead. Ferrari seemed like they had a bit of a puncture, which ruined their race. Red Bull really were too quick, and any hope like that, the small tweak in regulations would help Mercedes, really didn't materialise. But that's racing. Red Bull have just got it right this year, to be fair. Behind that, Alpine went well. Fernando, great. Ocon, continues to not only be the nicest guy in F1, but also pretty good. A big shout out to Seb Vettel. That's a great result for them, for him personally. And the last few laps of the race sort of killed the vibe a little. DRS trains are becoming a bit of a pain. I don't know what we can do about that really, but Max was that good today. He was in a world of his own. Speaking of worlds, the Big Bang Theory originated in Belgium. Now, I thought this was just an average TV show, but it turns out it's actually the origin of the universe back in, 1927, which, as we all know, is a few years after that old Godfella made out of a load of rubber bands or something. And this explains why they have over 1,000 beers brewed in Belgium. And with this mindset, you can only imagine them being drunk. And without McDonald's really being a thing here, there's little to soak up the beer after a night out, except, of course, French fries. Because yes, they're actually Belgian and not French. I'm happy to reduce the input of anything French after the recent Grand Prix at Ricard, so this one ticks a lot of boxes. I'm off now to Brussels Airport, the largest chocolate selling point in the world, amazingly. It's so good to be back, and we see you in only 7 days. Goodbye all.
If that isn't the best Pit Lane Paul update ever, I don't know what is. I mean, you can't get
Just
that
so
on any
much
other
to unpack
podcast.
from there, right?
I know. It's almost like you wrote this in advance because the way the things tied together, masterclass from Paul.
Oh yeah, thanks as always, Paul. And I think I'm interested to see what he's going to serve up next week. But never quite too sure what's going to come out when he sends it over.
Amazing,
brilliant.
Quick fantasy update because we're recording this just after enough time for the website to update. Not a good week for you or for me.
Yeah, but you kicked my little butt, I think.
Oh, I did. Yeah, that's not a hard thing to do. But
I
so
went all in on. But just 1 second before you do it.
Yeah.
It's like I did use as many changes as I could to load in on cars that I thought were going to be near the front, and I sold Max to get more budget so that I could get some of those ones that are going to be up at the front, because I kind of thought we might get that upside down race that not everybody would carve their way through, and I was completely wrong because there was no upside downness really to the grid. So I had all the cars that are at the back.
Well, I went in on Alpine's recent success as my constructor. That helped a lot. The Alpine boys did well, but I got to stop using the Haas boys because it is just not working out. I know Magnussen gave you 9 points total. I had Lewis. He was on a double streak. I thought this was it. I thought this was Mercedes' day. Boy, I was wrong to have Lewis in there. But yeah, I had Max and Carlos. 158 points for me, and Rob had 117. And for the season, our ongoing regular fantasy battle, I now have won 10 weeks, and Rob has won 4, which is less than 10 by a significant. It's 40%.
Why don't we talk
10.
about who? Let's shout out the listeners rather than like bore them talking about our head to head.
40%. Okay, so a couple people had some monsters this week. So Jacob Z Team A. 262 points. Used a Mega Driver. It was Max. Great job, Jacob. Paul H. No idea. We just heard from him. Pit Lane Paul. 2nd place. Way to go, Paul. 241 points. Mega Week. Used a Mega Driver. A way to start the second half. Cy M. Safe bet. We've talked a lot about you, Cy. You've got a great team going. 214. Jim M. Guitar Hero. Our friend who does the DRS music for us. Jim nailed it. 4th place, 211 points. And finally, in the top 5 this week, Mark Shuey from Australia. Mark, my man, good job, 204 points. All 5 of those people over 200, which is an amazing job in a week like this with all the penalties and the topsy-turvy world. Great job, guys.
Yeah, and actually, while we're giving shout-outs, I forgot to, we got kind of caught up in the drama of the race review, so I'm kind of rewatching the race, and I'd been avoiding WhatsApp to make sure I hadn't missed any of the kind of crucial pieces. My good friend Az, that's been on as a DRS guest, he dropped a note that said, after that coming together, he said, Lewis needs to go and find himself a deck chair and do an Alonso in an ironic turn of events.
Well, did you see him walking back?
Yeah. But if he had like been able to, Alonso sitting in the deck chair is an iconic image. And if Lewis had been able to find a deck chair after being, not being taken out by Alonso, he took himself out. But that would have been hilarious and a very big missed opportunity, I think, on Lewis's part.
Yeah, that would have been great.
Oh, and before we move off fantasy, Rob versus Brian the draft.
Yeah, this was my track. I win it.
Ever so slightly, just marginally.
So wait, where are we at? That's the third of our
you've
4.
won. You've won the draft. All I can do is win at Circuit of the Americas and just hope to get some kind of saving grace. But
wait, I'm up 3-0.
Point. You're up 3-0. You absolutely crushed me.
When somebody knows Formula One, it's just in their blood. It's in their DNA, they can't be held down by people like you, Rob.
So you're winning our fantasy league at the moment, are you?
No, I'm in 2nd place. I'm still in the top 1,000 in the world, but I'm still behind Andy.
Well, so you're not first. You're
I'm
the
last.
First
if you're not
loser,
first,
right?
you're last.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Correct. Shake and bake.
Okay, well, that kind of puts a bow around Spa, and after having the season break, we now don't need to wait at all because we seamlessly roll straight into race week again next week, tomorrow. When we will
Not today, though, right? Thanks again.
When we will be counting down to Zandvoort in the Netherlands. So yeah, we're going to do a little preview like we always do. I didn't realize it was this old, actually. For some reason, I thought it was kind of like mid-70s, 80s, then fell off the calendar again. But Yeah, it's been on the calendar since 1950, and it held non-championship races, which we keep promising to look into why those things existed. We still haven't done yet that, Brian.
Nope.
In 50 and 51, and then held an actual full championship race in 52 and 53, which were both won by Ascari. So yeah, it's been around a while.
It's kind of a cool sand dune area by the ocean there, or the sea, I should say, Zandvoort Resort Town. And it used to be, when it was launched in, actually, I think 48, the track opened, and it was part public road, part permanent track. And it kind of went on hiatus in like 85 or something like that. And it came back last year. It has banked corners. And in particular, there's one, and I was Googling it, and there's like one called Tarzan and one called something I can't pronounce, and I don't know which one it is. It seems like it's turn 3, but I don't think that's right either. But it's this internal banked left-hander that last year was epic to watch. People try to negotiate it while battling cars around them. And I love it. It's a smaller track. It's only 4.2 kilometers. So we'll get 72 laps.
Compared to the 44 today.
44, right. I mean, what was a good lap time at Spa? About
150 was the fastest, was it?
Yeah. Somewhere around there. And it's a 111 at Zandvoort. So it's a much smaller track. It is, I've listened to some of the drivers talk about it. You need a little more downforce because of all the turns. So maybe this brings Ferrari a little closer to challenging Red Bull. We'll see. But obviously, it'll be filled with the Orange Army cheering for Max. So I can't wait.
Yeah, and I'm going to steal your SAP stack because you always dish them out. But we kind of cover previous winners and say current winners. But because of the fact that it's been off the calendar since 85 and only came back last year, it's unsurprising, I guess, that Jim Clark, who we've covered in A Veil's Tale, has got 4 wins. And then the only current driver to win it is obviously Max, because it only came back last year and Max won it. So there's not kind of any recent form book to go from here. So I don't know whether that helps everyone else or if it just plays more into Max's hands, but I do like this race. I'm looking forward to it. Be interesting to see, like we keep saying, like broken records, it will be interesting to see the new cars following around this track now, how different that might be compared to what we saw last year. But yeah, looking forward to this one.
I am really curious. Like not using fantasy as a way of thinking of the tracks, but I thought about mega driving Max at Spa because of the lower downforce. They're already a faster car, but they still can manage corners. It's just Ferrari has a little more challenge at higher speed tracks. So I thought, that might be it. When he took the engine penalty, I said, "Oh, I'll wait for Monza, which is at the next race after Zandvoort. I'll wait for that." I said to myself, Zandvoort wasn't the time to mega drive Max because of the additional downforce needed. It brings Ferrari back into the picture. But at this point, I stick by my, if Max doesn't win, I'm surprised. And so I'm not probably ready, that confident to mega drive Max, but I'm going to do it soon because they're untouchable at this point.
Yeah, and just going back to something we didn't really touch on too much because he wasn't in the race for more than a lap, but I was disappointed by Mercedes' pace all weekend here. I just thought we'd started to see them on an upward trend, and we were kind of seeing some pace in that car. And I know this is a different track, Spa, and it's all about just high end speed and nothing to do with corners. But they're a bit disappointed today. I'm hoping they can come back into the fold next week. Maybe that even brings Mercedes into the mix rather than Ferrari. Who knows? But
well, George Russell quietly again finished in 4th. He's finished in the top 5 every race except for Silverstone when he had the accident on the first lap.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just I got myself convinced that they were going to be able to be past that kind of silent fourth, and really kind of trying to muscle in on the podium places.
Getting out of the witness protection program and actually trying to. Did you see George at all during the race?
No. Apart from at the beginning when he almost went off, that was about the most exciting thing that was involving George today. But there we are. But in talking of exciting things, look, that's another one, another seamless one to add to today's one. Yeah. Talking of exciting things, we mentioned some point in the past that listener Lee had set us up a Discord server and we were going to get our arms around it and try to work out how it all worked, and then launch it, which we have. We've got it all shipshape, and we will be putting the invite link in the show notes and putting it out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those kind of places. We've got sections for kind of like just general chat, that kind of stuff. We've got sections dedicated to race chat on race weekends, and we're also going to be using that. We're going to add a place where we can sign up for DRS guesting as well. So we're going to put that link out. We'd love as many people as possible. At the moment, it's essentially me, Brian, Pit Lane, Paul, and Lee who set it up for us. So there's 4 of us, so we would love to have more than 4 active in the race chat when we sit and watch the Dutch Grand Prix next week.
That'll be awesome. Lee, thank you so much. You're the man.
But I think that essentially puts a bow around what, despite the fact it wasn't the most exciting race in the world, it was good to be back.
It was great to be back.
It wasn't a bore fest where I thought, oh my God, I've waited 4 weeks for this. It was, it was okay at a track I love with a massively deserving winner. So I'm going to ask you before we sign off, how early does Max win it?
I think, it's a great question. I don't have the math in front of me to say when it could happen, but I think it's going to be 3 or 4 more races.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have 3 to 4 races at the end that are, I don't want to call them meaningless because there'll still be a lot to fight for, but from a driver's championship, it'll be wrapped.
The thing that hammered it home to me as a final thought here is I saw on Twitter, I can't remember who tweeted it out, they said, Charles could win every race and take fastest lap point on every race. And Max can finish second or third, I think, in every single race, and Charles still can't catch him. It's not even about Charles winning every race now till the end of the season. It's about Charles winning every race and Max having some kind of either bizarre finish where he finishes outside the podium or a DNF. He's going to need multiple DNFs. It's just not going to happen. He's going to win this at a canter and he's going to deserve it. But I think now the real eyes on the prize is number 2, Checo or Leclerc.
And obviously where they finish in the constructors relative to other teams, and can they hold off Mercedes? And there'll be a lot of questions there. So one thing that I actually think is important is I don't golf a lot, maybe once a year, and I'll go to the driving range maybe once a year. But when I'm hitting a bucket of balls at the range, I never stop on a bad ball. Like, I will leave golf balls behind as long as my last shot is a good one. And there are people who believe that same for basketball. If you're shooting threes, you finish on a make, right? There's a lot of theory to that. So when we say there may not be a lot to play for things like the Drivers' Championship, if I'm Ferrari, sorry, one more Ferrari comment here, you want to get it right as you end the year. You want to go off 2022 knowing you can do it right, knowing you know how to put together a strategy. You can get the team to have reliability and an approach that works to win. So even if Charles isn't going to win the Drivers' Championship, which we all don't think he will at this point, you still want to have a win or some good showings. You want to have flawless weekends. And you want to have some of those to close the season so that you come back in the off season and you work on the team, you work on the testing, you come back in 2023 feeling ready and into it, as opposed to like, boy, we really pooped in the bed and we left that there for the whole off season. Because that's what it is right now. And so for me, at the very least, they have to do that because they should be winning and contending for a title soon. But they won't if this is the mindset they have.
Well, Jerry Springer never had a final thought as good as that. So we can't better that, Brian. So I think on that note, it's goodbye from us.
Thanks, everybody. Be well.